for taking a minute today to stop by Brainstem Opera. Today we're going to be telling you about the brainstem. The brainstem is located anteriorly and partially inferior to the cerebellum. The brainstem plays a key role in the central nervous system by linking the spinal cord to the cerebellum in the brain. The brainstem consists of three main parts: the medulla, the pons, and the midbrain. The first section we'll go through is the medulla.
Thanks, Kimberly. The medulla oblongata, commonly known as the medulla, is a cone-shaped neural mass located most caudally in the brainstem. The medulla extends through the foramen magnum to the atlas, where it transitions into the spinal cord. There are four autonomic functional centres in the medulla: the respiratory, responsible for breathing regulation; the cardiac, responsible for heart rate regulation; the vasomotor, responsible for blood pressure and other homeostatic processes; and the reflexive, responsible for actions such as vomiting, coughing, sneezing, and swallowing. Let's focus on the anatomy of the ventral surface. The ventral surface consists firstly of the pyramids, which descend into a decussation. This structure contains motor fibres of corticospinal and corticobulbar tracts. The olives are oval structures located laterally to the pyramids and play a role in motor learning and functions and the auditory system. The anterior median fissure extends along the entire length of the medulla, transitioning into the spinal cord. This area provides a groove which carries the anterior spinal artery. The dorsal surface can be broken up into two sections: the open section and the closed section. Features of the dorsal surface include a posterior median sulcus, which is a groove only confined to the closed section. Also unique to the closed section are the gracile tubercle median to the cunate tubercle. Both the gracile and cunate tubercle receive sensory modalities such as proprioceptive information, vibration, and fine touch control, however, from different parts of the body. The gracile receives information from the middle thoracic and lower limbs, whilst the cunate receives information from the upper body.
Wow, Kate, I didn't know there was so much to know about the medulla, and juiced in time as well. Keep your eyes peeled like this potato, because I think it's time to hear about the pons.
The pons is the largest brainstem component and is horseshoe-shaped, featuring a collection of nerves within the anterior portion of the posterior cranial fossa. The pons has two primary functions: the regulation of respiration and the communication with the cerebellum and cerebrum. The pons is superior to the medulla, inferior to the midbrain, and anterior to the cerebellum and fourth ventricle cavity, connecting the medulla with the cerebellum and containing bundles of nerve fibres. The pons can be viewed dorsally and ventrally. The ventral surface of the pons contains multiple cranial nerves essential for survival. The bulging of the transverse pontocerebellar fibres makes up the anterior surface, which wraps vertically around the brainstem. The basilar artery is situated where separation of the ventral midline is observed through the basilar groove. The angle observed between the lower portion of the pons and the upper border of the medulla is known as the pontomedullary junction. Damage to this area can be fatal, leading to possible sudden death due to loss of respiratory and cardiac function. The dorsal surface connects to the cerebellum via the middle cerebellar peduncles. The fourth ventricle is also contained within this region. The dorsal surface of the pons and medulla form the floor of the fourth ventricle, with the medial division indicating the floor midline. The stria medullaris indicates the lower border between the pons and the medulla.
The midbrain can be separated into two sections, rostral and caudal. These are separated by whether the inferior or superior colliculi can be identified. Let's start with the caudal midbrain. Here we see a large nuclear structure known as the inferior colliculus that relays auditory information. It receives ascending inputs from auditory relay nuclei of the medulla and pons to the medial geniculate nucleus of the thalamus. The cerebral aqueduct contains cerebrospinal fluid and connects the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. We can identify two lemnisci, the spinal or lateral lemniscus, which carries auditory information from the cochlear nucleus, and the medial lemniscus, which transmits conscious proprioception from the body to the thalamus and cerebral cortex. The rubrospinal tract facilitates flexomotor neurons of the contralateral side. Cerebral peduncles contain the corticobulbar, corticospinal, and corticopontine fibers. The corticospinal tract contains descending motor fibers from ventral to sensory. Moving up to the rostral midbrain, here we can see the superior colliculi, which receives visual input from optic tract fibers, from descending fibers that form the tectospinal tract, and from movements of the eyes, head, and neck. We can also see the cerebral aqueduct, the spinal and medial lemnisci, and the corticospinal tract. Here we see the red nucleus, which starts the rubrospinal tract. Above the cerebral peduncles, we see the superior cerebellar peduncles, which contain ascending fibers from the cerebellum to the red nucleus and thalamus. Lastly, in the rostral midbrain, we can see the substantia nigra containing dopamine neuron projections to the neostriatum and GABA neuron projections to the thalamus, which regulate motor functions. You may have heard of the importance of dopamine function because damage to the substantia nigra can lead to loss of dopamine neurons, which can cause Parkinson's disease.
I hope to spark your interest today.
Thanks for watching!